It is time for Dying to Bloom with your host, Carrie Potter.
Good morning and welcome to Dying to Bloom. I'm Carrie Potter, and this is a monthly show that talks about green burials and burial options, the environment, the cost, and difficult topics as we face our own mortality here. But I'm very excited about today's show. Today we are having a guest joining us. Her name is Jennifer Johnson, and she is a burial coordinator and one of the founding members of Green Springs Cemetery, located in Newfield, New York. Now, Newfield is about a 4-hour drive from here. It is a cemetery with 100 acres of rolling hilltop meadows south of Cayuga Lake in New York's lovely Finger Lakes region. And Green Springs is surrounded by 4,000-acre Arnett Forest and 4,000-acre Newfield State Forest. As I mentioned, it's about a 4-hour drive here from Rockland County, and that's a little far for some of us, and that's one of the reasons that I set up the Green Cemetery Fund through the Rockland Community Foundation. So if green burial is something that sounds like you may be interested in, or even wanting to have this option available for Rockland County residents, please consider donating to the Green Burial Fund. You can go to rocklandgives.org and look for the fund right there on that website. Green burial encourages returning the body to the earth as simply as possible. Green cemeteries, like Green Springs, use biodegradable coffins, baskets, or shrouds, and they discourage embalming, vaults, and grave containers. Memorial markers are kept to a minimum, usually an indigenous stone rock, and flowers and plants are of local species. Green burial is encouraging changes in our funeral choices here in the U.S. because it raises awareness of the environmental impact of the death care industry, and as well as the problem of inflated costs. Nearly every form of disposition of a body, including cremation, harms the environment to some extent. And green burials play a part of reducing the impact of death on the planet and even in restoring land. I do believe we have our guest on the line, Jennifer Johnson. Again, Jennifer is a burial coordinator and one of the original founding members of Green Springs. I'm very excited to have you on the show with us today. Good morning, Jennifer.
Good morning, Carrie.
Thank you so much for joining us. So, Jennifer, as one of the original founding members of Green Springs, I'm so excited to have you join us. And I would love if you could tell us how Green Springs was established in the first place.
Well, thanks, Carrie. And I want to offer a thank you to you for your show. As you've stated, it's a topic that a lot of us don't want to think about or talk about, but we really need to do that, and educating yourself on this is really important. We're all going to leave this planet one day, and so thank you for having this show and bringing this into the light. We've been open at Green Springs. We were certified and opened in May 2006. We have sold about 900 sites since opening. We have 195, we like to call them permanent residents there, people that we've buried. We're a not-for-profit cemetery, and we actually have 125 acres now. We recently were able to purchase another 25 acres. And we are also a wildlife preserve, managing the land for wildlife habitat, trying to restore it. We actually are restoring it for wildlife habitat, and that's very important. And it fits in really well with our surrounding acres as managed. We're surrounded by 8,000 acres of forest. So this 125 acres kind of in the middle of that just ties everything together, and it's a beautiful place for birding, native plants, all kinds of nature.
Well, we haven't really had the opportunity to speak before, Jennifer, and I just wanted to let you know that I found out about Green Springs in a local newspaper here in Rockland County. So it was probably back in 2006 in which I read an article that I thought I found it extremely intriguing, and the more I looked into green burial and our current practices, the more I realized how it made sense. And then I did read Grave Matters, which opened my eyes even a little more and kind of became passionate about this topic. And that had a ripple effect and drove me into opening the Green Burial Fund here in Rockland County. And I have to say, I never met you, but I did have the opportunity to visit Green Springs a couple of times. And the first time I went, I actually just took a drive by myself, 4 hours upstate to Newfield. And I was overwhelmed with the beauty of Green Springs. You know, you drive up this little rocky mountain road, and I just parked along the road there, saw the sign for the cemetery, and I was alone. I didn't see one person the whole time I was there. I did see the caretaker's house, and it was a warm spring day. The sun was shining. There was a light breeze, and there I was on the top of this mountain. And what really I found, I guess, just peaceful and beautiful was just the oneness with nature and life that you feel at Green Springs. It certainly did not feel like what you may think of as a cemetery. The life, the butterflies, the birds, just the sounds of the crickets and everything was just so inspiring to me.
Yes, it is absolutely beautiful up there, and if you want to get away from it all, that's a good place to go because, like you said, you don't hear traffic, you don't hear anything. And right now, during the winter time, when it's oftentimes snowing up there because of the altitude, you can almost hear the snowflakes land on a quiet day if it's not windy. Otherwise, you can hear the wind coming through the pine trees, and it's such a place to just be one with nature. It truly is. It's beautiful. You have an almost 360-degree view of what's around, and on a clear day, you can see down to the south. You can see the endless mountains of Pennsylvania from our Leopold overlook.
I just kind of did my own self-tour and walked around the mountain area. There's a beautiful bench on one of the highest points, I believe, that
Leopold overlook, yeah?
Yes, absolutely beautiful. I took a seat there and rested for a little bit. But what you do see in lieu of a traditional headstone is a little bit of a mound in the ground, and I did see some engraved indigenous stones with a person's name and some dates on it, and otherwise you just see flowers and beauty. It doesn't feel like you're walking through a modern day cemetery.
Right. And we one of the things is for us is that it will always look like that. It will always look like just a natural place. We mow one time a year, and that's in the fall after the meadow nesting birds have left. And the reason why we mow it all is that we need to keep those meadows open for those birds that need that expanse. We recently got a grant from the Natural Resources Conservation Service to restore an area, in particular for the meadowlark. They need a bigger expansive area, and that project is well underway, and we love our birds up there. They're beautiful. One of our newly opened burial area is called the Bobolink Meadow, and the bird life up there is just wonderful with all the surrounding forest.
Jennifer, how, as you were developing the cemetery, how was it received in the community, and what inspired you to be a part of it?
There were some people who had some fears, and they feared about groundwater contamination. They were afraid of coyotes digging up bodies, and these are just natural fears, and I understand those fears because people didn't know or understand. And I'm pretty sure we put those fears to rest. We did research, and so that was not a fear anymore. And now people in the community, as far as I know, are really happy to have us there.
Well, it certainly is a way to preserve the land, and I would love to see something, as I mentioned, and I'll probably mention several times during this show, a little more locally for our Rockland County residents. And at this time, there is still land available to make such a cemetery, at least within Rockland Orange County area. And I asked you that question to see what types of obstacles and concerns might come up for area residents. And but again, the cemetery does serve as a dual purpose, as you mentioned, a wildlife preserve and nature and walking trails. And locally in our area, I would love to perhaps incorporate some of the native Ramapo Lenape traditions or something just to help relate it to our indigenous people here in the area. How did you become a burial coordinator, and what are your responsibilities at Green Springs?
I became burial coordinator in March of 2008. And up until that time, at each burial that we got called for, several of us board members would go and be there and handle the burial. And it just was getting to be a little overwhelming for everybody. So we decided that I would become the burial coordinator. And I absolutely love my job, and my responsibilities are to be in contact with families who have just lost someone and guide them through the natural burial process. A lot of people that call say, this is the first time I've ever had to deal with anything like this, and they're talking mainly about the death of a loved one, let alone a new kind of burial procedure, but it may be something that their loved one requested or they want for their loved one. So I'm in contact with the families, guiding them through the process, answering any questions that they might have about it. I also am in contact with funeral directors, and the same thing. Now, funeral directors know a little bit more about green burial or natural burial because it's been around for a while now, and it is a movement, and people are requesting it. So they're being responsible and educating themselves, and most of them that I talk to have been to our website. We have a special section just for funeral directors that might address some of the things that they need to know. And then the funeral director, the family, and I will work together to set a burial date and time. And then when that day and time comes, I meet them at the cemetery. The funeral director usually arrives first, and we take care of paperwork, and then the family starts to come. And my job is to kind of tell them before we even go to the burial site, just let them know that, I'm here, our staff is here to help answer any questions. We want this to be a good experience for you, and this is how it's going to go. And I just run through a little preview, so they're not going down to the grave site wondering how it's going to work. They have a kind of an idea already, and the family is usually does the ceremony or the celebration of their loved one's life. We will load the casket onto the cart and then pull that down to the gravesite, and the family and friends will act as pallbearers and remove the casket from the cart and put it on the crossboards over the grave. Then the family gets to have their ceremony. And this is the part I love the most because I get to, it feels like I know the person after, the person that we're burying, and that's a special connection for me. The ceremony can be whatever the family decides. And oftentimes it'll be stories, reading, poetry. We've had ceremonies where there were musicians that came and played. We had a bagpipe there one time. It was in wintertime. I remember this very well. And a bagpipe that played. Different musicians. People have even brought, how you call those radios, like a boombox with somebody's favorite tape on it, and they'll play that song during part of the ceremony. We've had monks that chanted during a burial ceremony, and that was the only thing that people heard. The whole ceremony was done in silence other than the monks chanting. That was very special. One time we had a gentleman who was a member of a dance troupe, and his fellow dancers came, and they were a huge part of the ceremony. They pulled up in cars, and it kind of reminded me of, I got a little tickled, actually. Kind of reminded me of the clowns that get out of the Volkswagens at the circus. The doors opened in these cars, and all these guys jumped out, and it was just wonderful. It so expressed this man's love for his involvement with these dancers. And they danced around. Some of them had musical instruments. And it was truly a celebration of his life. One time we had a cell phone burial. And this might sound a little crazy, but it actually did happen. The woman had a cell phone, and one of the family members was physically not able to be present. So when the ceremony began, she dialed him up and put him on speakerphone, and he got to be a part of the ceremony. I thought that was very creative and in an important way. So thank goodness for technology for that.
It sounds like a lot of beautiful, creative, unique ceremonies take place there.
Exactly. They are beautiful and creative. And if I might share one more.
Of course.
This was a fellow who had a reputation for loving coffee and donuts. And it was attended by really a lot of people. And family and friends brought a table, and they brought boxes of donuts and boxes of coffee, cups and everything. So part of the celebration was that people ate donuts and drank coffee around his gravesite as people were doing readings and remembering different stories about his life or maybe their interaction with this person. It was very creative, improvisational, and very real.
Jennifer, would you say that these ceremonies occur more in lieu of a wake, since people buried at Green Springs are not embalmed, or do people still have both? Do they still have a wake ceremony?
Well, I think the memories and that kind of thing might happen at memorial services and such.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is, Carrie, when it happens at the actual burial, it just seems like such a healing process for those who are present.
Yes, I can imagine that. It sounds like it.
Right. I buried my mom there. My family and friends and I buried Mom there July 2013. And it was a lot easier because we could laugh about things. My mom liked drinking red wine. So we did a similar thing, my brother and sister and I, and we brought her last box of wine, and we each poured a glass, and respectfully poured it over her before we closed the grave. And we talked about it, and we laughed about it. Each one of us would give her a different amount of wine when she asked for it, because I was her caregiver and just gave a small amount. Then my brother gave her the biggest amount, and it was just a beautiful thing. It's very healing, and for all those that are there, you come together in a heart-to-heart kind of a way. And anything else at that burial time, when you're actually there, seems to just drop away, and you are truly celebrating the life of this person being buried.
Well, I lost my mother and father as well, and they are buried in what you would call a modern cemetery here in the Rockland County area. And when at that time, which was about 20 years ago, I wasn't aware of a green burial option. I don't know how much it existed at that time. So I just wanted to point out also, as we do this show, that there isn't a right or wrong, and I certainly don't judge anyone for their burial choices, but I just want people to be aware of the options that are now available. And if we do not have a green cemetery established here in the Rockland County area, when I go, Green Springs is my top choice, because I do think it's absolutely beautiful. And I picture a lot of these ceremonies that you're talking about out there on a beautiful day, because that's what the weather was like when I was able to visit, which I did visit a couple of times. I even met the I think it was the caretaker's girlfriend at the time. Someone was actually planning a wedding when I visited one of the last times. Are you aware of that, Jennifer?
Yes, that was the caretaker's wife. They were married when we were planning the wedding. And the wedding was, this young man wanted to be married on the cemetery property. He grew up in Newfield, and he was on our ecological advisory committee. And they got married on Green Springs property.
Which again, you have to see it and experience it. I think just to know how beautiful it really is, and the I don't know, it just another world type feeling. When I went there, I really felt like I was in heaven.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for saying that. It is true. You do feel like that.
I do.
It's quiet, and sometimes the birds singing, and it's just so beautiful to be there, and oftentimes just be alone with that.
Jennifer, I do want to open the phone lines if anyone wants to call in, if they have any questions or comments regarding Green Springs. The phone number here is 845-362-0013. And joining us on the line is Jennifer Johnson, Burial Coordinator at Green Springs Cemetery, located in Newfield, New York. Jennifer, another thing I noticed is that you're not far away from Cornell University and Ithaca. I was wondering if the colleges do have any type of involvement with the cemetery, or have any classes or anything along that line.
We had, pretty early on, we had a class come to do they were a landscape architecture class, and they helped us with some of our mapping soon after we first opened. That was very hands-on for them. We've had requests for students to come and do things, and sometimes it's a little touchy. Families like to have private ceremonies, and we're first of all respectful of that. And we're willing to work with students if it fits in with what we do at Green Springs. And that landscaping architecture class was perfect. they could come out there and map things and do things in that way. We're always looking for volunteers to help out. Students, yes, on occasion.
Okay. And Jennifer, we do have a caller on the line. Good
Okay.
morning. You are on Dying to Bloom.
Yes, good morning, Jennifer. I just had a question regarding what cemetery regulations are and, do they differ from other cemeteries?
Well, when we first proposed our idea to the New York State Cemetery Board in, I think it was 2004, 2005, they had no rules and regulations for a natural green burial ground. So they worked with us to come up with the kinds of rules and regulations. And yes, our rules and regulations do differ from conventional or contemporary cemeteries. We don't use vaults, we don't use pesticides, we don't do things the way they do in conventional or contemporary cemeteries.
Right, and are those regulations on the websites or not, or?
I think our rules and regulations are posted on our website. If you're thinking of starting one of these, it's best to call the New York State Division of Cemeteries and find out particular answers to questions.
Right, I just wanted to know how the rules differ from, traditional cemeteries versus green burial.
Right. Well, mainly it's that we don't allow embalmed bodies. We don't allow fancy caskets that might have come from, rainforest hardwood trees. We don't allow the vaults.
Okay, thank you very much. I do appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope I answered your question.
Absolutely, thank you.
You're welcome.
And for those that would like to visit the Green Springs website, it is naturalburial.org, correct, Jennifer?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. We have a pretty good website. Answers a lot of questions. And, if I may say, I think it's so important to talk about this and to be educated about your burial when that time comes. Speaking to all the listeners out there, there's a wonderful group called the Funeral Consumers Alliance. I know you've had Josh Slocum on your show before.
Yes.
They have a wealth of information. And if you're not ready to talk about things, you can at least go to their website and start to get educated about this. Because there's a lot of assumptions that people have about this time of life and burial. And some of those assumptions aren't true. So get the real information, educate yourselves, and be ready.
Well, that's
It's a huge event.
That's one of the purposes of this show, Jennifer.
I know it is.
And also along that line, I wanted to mention that green burials have come a long way since you started Green Springs. There are other green cemeteries that have popped up in New York, and also a lot of, at least a few in our area, regular modern cemeteries have made a green section, which permits people to at least make that option of not being embalmed and being able to be buried in a biodegradable, casket or shroud. So,
Right.
However, I do have to say that I have visited some of those cemeteries, including Sleepy Hollow and Mary Rest Cemetery in Mahwah. And while I do commend them for making the green section, and I think that's great. I don't think they can compare at all to Green Springs, just that beautiful mountaintop, 100 and, what did you say, 125 acres?
25 acres, yeah.
So it's just absolutely beautiful, and I do encourage people to take a drive on a nice spring day at least. And we are getting close to the end of the show, and I do have a couple more questions that I'm going to quick get in there because I'm curious myself, since we're talking about the warm weather in the spring when I did visit. What happens on a day like today if someone passes who purchased a plot or would like to purchase a plot at Green Springs? Can they be buried? What do you do in the winter?
Yes, they can. And this winter, as cold as it's been, we've had the first time where we had trouble digging with the backhoe for a grave. So when we first opened, we purchased this this device that you place over the grave, hook a propane torch to it, and leave it for several hours, and it thaws the ground enough so that the grave can be dug. And we do burials all year round. Sometimes the snow blows sideways, but we're there, and it works.
Otherwise, if it is warm weather, is that when graves are hand dug? Because I thought that's what you did really at Green Springs.
No, at Green Springs, we can't hand dig. The ground there is glacial fragipan. Means it's a lot of rocket clay mixed in with the dirt, and it's not possible to hand dig a grave there.
Oh, okay. That is interesting. I would think that may be an issue here as well in Rockland County, but we haven't gotten that far yet.
Yeah.
Let's talk cost for a minute, because that's, as much as for me personally, I would choose Green Springs just for all of the other reasons you talked about, the personal, celebration that you can have and the connection with nature that you feel there. But cost is a factor. Can you give us an idea of what a plot costs there?
Yes. Burial site costs $1,000. That's for a 15-foot square site, which is really big. And that is a little piece of property then that is the family's or whoever purchased it. If people can plant native plants on that. Now, at the time that the plot is used, there at the burial, there's a $1,000 burial service fee. So the total cost for Green Springs is $2,000. That includes the burial. If someone wants a stone, they're in charge of getting the stone, having it engraved. Our caretaker will install the stone. That's $100. But that's everything for Green Springs cost. Now, something that a lot of people don't know is you also have to have a funeral director involved, at the very least, to be present and witness the burial.
Which is a New York State regulation. That isn't the same in every state, right?
Right. So that's at the very least. A lot of people don't want to do home funerals, so they have the funeral director. They like to have the viewings. So there's the additional cost of the funeral home. So there are really two separate costs. Cemetery and funeral homes are very different. And a lot of people have thought they're together, but that's not true. So another thing to be educated about and know more about.
Well, we have talked about this, the cost of dying on this show before, and a modern day funeral does average around $10,000 if you're going to choose embalming and choose a fancy coffin and the cement vault and the cemetery plot and the all the fees involved. It could be really costly. So that's another reason to choose green burial.
It is. And the other thing is that for those of us who have lived environmentally conscious lives and really care about the environment, by choosing green burial, you will continue to help the planet for years after your body goes into the earth. It's a sustainable burial option, and one that is just very, very helpful. It's like our last gift back to the earth that we can give. And that's our body at our death. And it just makes so much sense.
And Jennifer, I read that you are a musician as well. You play the Plains Indian flute guitar.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Do you play for ceremonies at Green Springs?
I have played for a couple of ceremonies, yes, I have. And it's very special. That's just a very special time.
Well, we are just about out of time. Jennifer Johnson, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, if people want to visit Green Springs' website, naturalburial.org, and I'd like to give my email, which is dyingtobloom@gmail.com. If anyone from the area is interested in visiting Green Springs and would like more information, I'd be happy to provide that for them. I would love to have a little group tour together sometime, so if you're interested in that, send me an email as well. And Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, and I would be happy to meet you sometime and give you a real tour up there.
That sounds good. I will let you know when I'm heading that way again.
Okay, Carrie. Thank you so much for doing what you do and getting the word out there about natural burial.
My pleasure. Take care, Jennifer.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you for joining me for this month's Dying to Bloom. Please consider making a donation to the Green Cemetery Fund through the Rockland Community Foundation at rocklandgives.org to help bring a green cemetery to the Rockland County area. And consider taking that trip to Green Springs in Newfield, New York. This show discusses topics related to our own mortality. We all are going to die someday, so make smart burial choices and keep in mind what really matters. Probably not the traffic, the job title, petty disagreements. Instead, laugh, live, give family and friends the attention they deserve, and join me, Carrie Potter, the next fourth Thursday of the month for Dying to Bloom.